Hello and welcome to the very first podcast, as opposed to a radio show. Remember that TEDMAR and the radio show will be coming out twice a month, and we're hoping to do these podcasts twice a month as well. Exact locations for the radio show will be advertised on the website so that you can click on and go straight to it. So it's our first one. It's been quite a while since I've had a chance to go through the normal format. So I'll do what we always expect, and hopefully it won't be too bad. The only difference is, of course, we've just got 1 hour. Right, first of all I want to talk about the satanic attacks which have been going on right across the planet, right down from attacks against individuals, right across to organizations. Lots of healing centers have had very difficult times lately. These are some most established organizations that have done everything from aromatherapy right through to the more complex healing practices. That's now running out of steam. These attacks now have come to an end almost, and I would say that the bad guys have probably used up something like 6 months worth of their energy. So we've weathered the storm. Let's see where we go from there. You may have picked in the news that Barbara Bush has died, or did she? There is some confusion as to whether there's been a secret operation to remove her physically by her own team, if you like, and to have a false funeral. Barbara Bush would be the genuine grandmother in satanic cult circles. The senior female is always referred to as a grandmother, and it's quite possible that she genuinely has died, but it's also quite possible that she's been removed to a safe location. I don't have any more information on that, but we'll see what we get with that. I want to talk about the situation in France. You will know that President Macron was previously a very successful banker, come from a very large banking background, and it was always very obvious to, I think, all of us that somebody who had been a very successful banker was suddenly projected to becoming a president of a country. Well, he must have a lot of backing. And what's been hitting the news lately at very top levels is that United States automatic and semi-automatic weapons manufacturers had received 2 orders from a fictitious third-party representative wishing to buy large quantities of these weapons. The arms manufacturers are not as unethical as you might expect, and they did do some digging, and they found that this was basically on behalf of an Israeli company excuse me, an Israeli company, and it might well be that these weapons are perhaps destined for France. Perhaps President Macron has some use for a number of people armed with weapons that have come through the non-official channels. We don't know. But what we do know is that France and Israel have a very long association. It was France that gave Israel the Mirage 3C jet fighters, which gave them air supremacy in the Six-Day War in 1967. It was France, possibly under de Gaulle, that gave Israel nuclear technology. Israel became one of the nuclear powers through technology given by the French. So there's a very strong and continuing relationship there, and it's possible now that this is broken, that this deal may not go through now. I want to actually also talk about President Trump. Those of you who have been aware and following the news know that there is this talk of some 20-odd thousand secured, sealed away, locked up indictments. These refer to something like 20,000 paedophiles in multinational companies, large corporates, household names. Now, it's not clear whether President Trump intends to out these people, or whether he's saying to them, I've got these names, if you continue to try to assassinate me, then I'll use these names. So we don't know whether he's going to use them as part of his ongoing project, or whether he's just using it as an insurance scam in terms of holding people to ransom, if you like. You let my administration alone and I won't hit your names. Personally, I would rather that he just went with the names and just released them. I think that's probably the best way to go, and I think he will once he's fairly secure that he's okay. When we talk about the FBI, we realise that it was the FBI that gave President Trump the greatest problems. That's why he had to clear out the Edgar Hoover building during the run-up to his election campaign. It was the CIA working with WikiLeaks that actually helped to win the campaign. It had nothing to do with Russia and everything to do with the CIA, and the FBI was working against him, but he seems to have largely removed most of the FBI problems. Also want to talk about Trump visiting Britain. Normally when an American head of state comes to Britain, he or she would meet the Prime Minister and obviously the Queen, because the Queen's very important. But you won't find in the news is that President Trump said he did not want to meet the Queen. He refused point blank, and that's caused a huge diplomatic issue. And President Trump has been told, if you go there and you don't meet the Queen, it'll cause us a great deal of issues. So I understand that President Trump is reconsidering that. But it's very interesting that he said that he was prepared to meet the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, but was not prepared to meet the Queen. I think he'll end up having to meet her because it'll end up with so many questions that he doesn't want to deal with. But I think it shows the mindset of the man, and I think he knows a great deal about what's going on in the United Kingdom. I want to talk about Turkey. It's very interesting. During the Obama years, we had lots of American states and different countries wanting their gold bullion back, and many people asked, well, why would a foreign country give America gold? And it's basically because America is the most powerful country on the world, and most sovereign states have got their gold based in the US or with the US. Now, Turkey was approached actually by American intelligence and told that if they asked for their gold back, they would be given it. But the deal was that they would stand clear of any issues that may occur in the Middle East, and issues of any fundamentalist activity, and that Turkey would continue to support the US in a regional capacity. So it isn't that Turkey's gone to the US and said we want our gold back. The US has gone to Turkey and said, if you ask for it, we'll give it, but this is the deal that goes with it. And finally, I actually want to talk about somebody sent me a message saying, had I seen Benjamin Fulford's latest report? And just before I came on, I had a quick look, because he talked about the tinfoil hats, and his comment at the bottom of his blog, I think, was something along the lines of, well, maybe these tinfoil hats aren't so mad because it prevents mind control from electronic devices at a distance. And I'm reminded of the time that I don't know if it's a privilege or not, but I got a phone call at home from the very man that makes the tinfoil hats, who swore blind that he wasn't intelligence but had worked as a contractor for the intelligence. It turned out that he still works for American intelligence, and he offered me one of these free tinfoil hats, but when he got chatting with me, he realized that the hat probably wouldn't work, and because the sort of off-planet entities that I visit or visit me are not really the greys. Tinfoil hats are very good at preventing greys, but not good at preventing anything else. And I also wasn't in the market for preventing anything, because I think that I'll learn as much from talking to off-planet entities as they will learn from me. But what was interesting was that this chap had a great deal of information. So when you read that article from Benjamin Fulford, don't look on this tinfoil hat man as somebody who's eccentric, somebody who's a bit kooky or crazy. Far from it. The guy is very knowledgeable, knows exactly what he's doing, and if you genuinely have a child that's being affected by grey aliens, he will do it for free. Just make him a donation. So that's well worth doing. Okay, that's my update really. Now we're going to go on to questions. What's going to happen is Rebecca is going to read out the questions, that you've sent. We've had something like 600 in now. We're far more systematic. This is on a first come first served basis, so literally if you are number 5 on the question, you will be number 5 that's read out. The only questions we won't read out are those that are ridiculous or offensive. So the first question that we had was from a Mr. Timothy in Scotland, who asked me if I'm a member of the Freemasons, and the answer is no, I'm not, and I've never been a member of the Freemasons, although they did try to ask me to join. And if you look back, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I did a conference and I actually talked about the approach, and in fact I had an application form to join, and there was a great interest about why would a secret society have an application form. And I'd asked them that, and they said, well, because in your case, Simon, we think we'd like to have all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed, so we've done an application form for you. I didn't join, and I'm not a member. Okay, so that's the one I wanted to pick up on, because this was a question that had been routinely, I understand, asked at All Spirit Radio, JP, but never really I remember being asked that. So I thought, well, as it's been asked several times, I thought that. So okay, over to you, Becky, if you want to read out the questions.
Okay, from Hans Andre. Hi Simon, have you received my donation? I did not get a brief message from you like with the donations before, so I just wanted to be sure.
Right, what I'll do is I'll just check through my list that I'm going to read out, and just see. I don't remember. Let me just check. It's been, obviously we've been off air for a while, so yes, I did, and he's actually on the list to be thanked. So yes, the answer is yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, next question from Michael or Michelle. How may I help you? You have put so much effort and risk in forming humanity. My 23 trade certificates in engineering led me to work in secret projects. My fiance was secret defence in Canada, 25 years research plus. You speak the truth. I would be honoured to help. Loving intent to you, merci mon ami.
Right, okay. I'm glad we didn't give the second name out. I will accept help from anybody who's decent, kind, and wants humanity to survive. The problem I have is that it's a very, I can't even use the word operation, can I? It's a very small setup, and I often get lots of offers for help, and I just don't have the capacity to do that. And I mean, that's the plan for the future, to set up these healing centres, to have one of the centres in the UK to be a head office, to do workshops, to run interviews with the media, to train the trainers, and I mean sort of take a group of healers and have a senior healer and then train those to run accredited courses. That's the plan. And once we have a structure in place, and that would work very closely with connecting consciousness, not just in the UK but across the world, then I'll be in a much stronger position from a structural point of view to do that. However, when somebody has a particular skill that we need now, then I would be very interested. So thank you for that, and I haven't seen, obviously I haven't had sight of any of these questions. I deliberately don't want to see the questions beforehand. So what I'll do is I'll check back and I'll send you an email, and maybe we can get in contact and maybe we can meet. So thank you for that.
Okay, this one's from Jason. Can you briefly describe the 12 dimensions?
Briefly. Right, from a 3D perspective, the easiest way is to understand a ladder. This is actually incorrect, but it's the easiest way to understand it. If we think of a ladder and we have the first rung and we go up, and literally if you imagine one on top of another, you will get the image of a block of flats or a tower block. What I want to excuse me, what I want to get across is that one dimension is higher frequencied than the next. So they're not exactly on top of each other, but in terms of lightness, they exist at a higher realm. Now within the dimensions there are sub-dimensions. There are currently 12 dimensions, and the 13th is being got ready, but within each dimension there is a sub-dimension or compartments within that. Each dimension has worlds or a living environment which is based around its energy field. So the higher the frequency, the more clear, the lighter, the purer, the more incisive that worlds or worlds are. The lower down, the more complicated, the more difficult, the more dense, thick, heavy, and the more primitive it is. However, you don't reach the 7th or 8th dimension unless you've worked your way up. So all of those worlds or those dimensions, those beings, have at some stage been where we are and have worked their way up. Now many of these beings are stuck or trapped, particularly in the lower 4th dimension, and they have, like the reptilians, have run out of environmental evolution. So they have become so negative or so service to self that their capability to advance has failed them. There are other alien beings that are able to advance and move up, and certainly this is what we want of the human race. So I can't really give any more of an understanding than that, but suffice it to say that while we talk about 12 dimensions, there are sub-dimensions within them. Thank you.
Okay. Kyle asks, can you describe the current state of the Draco and their empire?
Oddly enough, we need to imagine the Dracos as a franchise, or one empire, but over vast distances, outposts or groups that are controlled to a leadership, but they run as franchises in the sense that they are responsible for their own resourcing and their own trading. And I think your question is asking perhaps more about what is their economic capability, their military capability. Are they growing? Are they shrinking? That's I think what your question is. The question is a good one because it's a little bit of a reflection of what's happening to negative entities on Earth and those that are associated with Earth, as they're contracting. The negative elements right across the multiverse are in retreat. So what's occurring on the Earth is nothing more than a mirror image of what is occurring elsewhere. So the franchises, the empire, if we want, is contracting and reducing. So it's very much a consolidation phase in the enclaves that the Draconis reptilians maintain. It's not an expansion, and that's new to them, and it's something that they don't really understand. So that's the answer, and it's a good question. Thank you.
The next question is from James. Will there be a solar flash sometime this year, as stated by many QHHT practitioners?
We need to understand that a solar flash, in my understanding, is different from an ejection from the sun or indeed from galactic center, which is a type of energy to uplift the planet and the human race. Solar flash has more probabilities or possibilities to it. I do expect one. What I don't know is the intensity of it. The solar flash is a much shorter, sharper shock, and the solar flash could seriously impact communications on the Earth. And I have, although we haven't talked specifically about a solar flash, I think we've been generally talking about sun flares, eruptions from the sun. But over the last 5 years, certainly in Great Britain, I don't know about elsewhere, but every telegraph pole, every electrical pylon has been re-earthed. The power companies have actually been going around and double insulating most of the major power elements in Great Britain, United Kingdom, because they are expecting some form of electrical energy, and they're just trying to proof out the system as best they can. Now that's cost a considerable amount of money, and they wouldn't have done that unless they had serious belief that there was some form of energy burst from space. I think much more likely a solar flash than a galactic center producing energy to cause problems. So yes, I expect it this year. I don't know the strength of it.
Okay, this question is from Julie, who describes herself as just a US citizen asking the question. Tell me your thoughts please on Q.
I came across Q a while back, and I haven't looked recently, and you know, had I had foresight of that question, I would have had a double check. So I'm basing it on what I saw a while back. I thought a lot of the information seemed pertinent and seemed accurate, but like many of these things, you know, I like people to be around for quite a while, because then you see the consistency there. You know, I've been going personally, what, 7 years, 5 years fully active, and if you look, you can see the cat is just stirring and turning around there. That's a very lovely sight. Look at that life for a cat. So I think Q is, from my knowledge, is quite new on the scene. Probably best to ask me that question in about a month or a couple of months' time. Thank you.
And this question is from David. If a Draco or Archon does not feed on Louche for 24 hours, will they die?
No. Archons don't feed on Louche. Dracos do. Archons feed on a different form of energy, unless, of course, you're using the term Louche in a I was going to make a joke and say in a loose way. That was just not funny, is it? If we're using the term louche in a loose way, then yes. But if you are asking me to interpret the word louche exactly as it stands, then no. And that's how I'm going to interpret it, exactly as it stands. So Archons don't feed on that. Reptilian creatures do, as do some other creatures that are of a sort of a grey alien stroke reptilian hybridization. They don't die, but their biological capabilities reduce. Their ability to hold a fourth dimensional framework within a third dimensional world reduces. If we look at some of the highest in the land who are not at all human, they require a different form of energy, and without that they then go into decline and the mask begins to slip. I talked about that with some of the major characters on Earth in some of my presentations a while back. I showed photographs of very prominent people who were going through a degeneration process, and they're often removed by their fellows and replaced by somebody new. So the answer is no, but if you were to starve a Draconis of Louche over a period of time, it would be like taking somebody who's a crack addict off crack. That's the best way to describe it.
Okay, thank you. Valerie asks, why don't we hear much about the tall whites? Charles Hall seems to be the only one who has contact with them. Are they real?
I've never met Charles, and 3 times I tried to meet him. I went down to the main conference at St Anne's in Great Britain and didn't meet him. I don't know why. Yes, they are real. The difference is that the tall whites don't grab headlines. I don't wish to be rude, but maybe 75% of what is written on YouTube or the internet isn't actually written by people with direct experience. You know, somebody may watch 4 or 5 videos from different people, try and string all that together, and then produce something and try and pass it off as, you know, absolute gospel fact. And that's just not right, but that's what's happening a lot on the internet. The tall whites are quite friendly with the American military, particularly the United States Air Force. The difference between tall whites and many others is that tall whites are extraterrestrials. They're not extra dimensionals or interdimensionals, they are your real ETs. And that means that when they travel to Earth, they travel in real time, just as we, you and I, would travel if we were to use a conventional spacecraft. We would strap ourselves into a seat and then we would go and the clock would tick. And of course, remember Einstein's theory of relativity, the clock would slow down. But basically we would be in real time. So if it takes you 50 years, you age the equivalent of that. And that's where this sort of going into some sort of hibernation comes from. So these creatures are real ETs. They travel in real time. Their spacecraft does not reach the speed of light. Their craft was under the speed of light. It was a relatively primitive device. I met somebody who had met Charles Hall and had a meal with him and had a discussion, and I then had a discussion with this individual, and we talked about the power plant of the craft, the alien craft. And I always talk about the figure of 8, which is the fusion drive. So we don't hear about tall whites simply because they're kept hidden. They don't interfere with humanity in a negative way. They are managed by the military and they come here for a vacation. Yes, you heard me correctly. They come here for a vacation. Why not? It's a beautiful planet. Maybe we need to be able to sit down and share it. So it's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Samuel asks, will angels help the inhabitants of Earth?
Depends what we're calling angels. We could say that Lucifer was a fallen angel. I think all good beings will help the Earth and the people of the Earth, and all negative beings will basically attempt to prevent good things happening. The problem we've had in the past is that too many good people or good beings stood back and said they weren't going to get involved. And in the recent years we've seen that shift quite dramatically in the favour of light. Most good beings now are becoming involved. The word I struggle with is angel, because I've got this image of something with wings blowing on a trumpet, but that's because the church gave me that image when I was about 3 years old. And in fact, you can't buy, in Great Britain, you can't buy an advent calendar or a Christmas card without something with wings blowing on a trumpet. If we lose the word angel, and we talk about an ascended being of great kindness and great love, then yes, absolutely. And my word to them is, get down here and get more involved.
Okay, this question is from William, who asks, you've said that reptilians trade genetics. What particular genetic traits have they obtained through trading? Have they used these genetics on humans? And what were they before they had alien genetics? Finally, what other races have they traded with? Okay,
that was so complicated. Can I have the first part again, please?
Okay. What particular genetic traits have they obtained through trading?
Right. On this planet we use money. The reptilians use a whole range of things to trade, and one of them is genetics. The reptilians, for all the nonsense you read on the internet, we mustn't underestimate them. They are one of the finest geneticists anywhere, and that is why they had the capability to play such a large part in the evolution. I don't mean Charles Darwin's evolution, the evolution of humanity. Many alien races, perhaps up to 6 times before the reptilian contingent arrived, had tinkered around with humanity and taken what they found and took it to a set level. But it was the reptilians that then took that level to the Homo sapiens sapien level, not because they, like the others, were interested in seeing the development, but because they saw that there was a labour capability here, operating on a planet that was oxygen based, which curtailed their obvious movements. To create an indigenous workforce made a lot of sense to them. So they used their capabilities. Now when they used their genetics, what they did was they looked at the planet and they said, what is there on this planet that's mammalian that we can use with this stock, this human stock. And so they didn't have to trade this was already here. So we talk about the rhesus monkey, so that was one of the elements they used, but they also had huge banks of reptilian DNA, and so this is something that they began to experiment not just with the human race, but with many of the mammalian life forms that they found on the planet at the time. You know, I've talked a lot about the domestic cat. However, they will also have genetics for physical bodies. So we don't just talk about something to do with the shape of the eye, or how many fingers or the type of nails, but whether something was tall and thin, or whether it was squat, whether it had a preference for water, whether it had a preference for dry, hot temperatures. These were the sort of genetics that they had, and they had a huge practice. If you think about Zecharia Sitchin's, he managed to decipher from the tablets that there were two forms of humanoids that were created: a dark-skinned people and a light-skinned people. And I think that's just two that we've given. I think there were many others that just didn't make it through. In terms of the multiverse, wherever the reptilians landed and conquered or formed a base, they collected material, and then they would then trade that with other species, other groups. That's how they would do it. And that's the first part of the question. What's the next part?
Well, you've answered quite a lot there.
Have I?
One of the parts was, have to use these genetics on humans,
right.
And yes is the answer.
Right.
What were they before they had alien genetics?
I don't understand that. Do you mean what were the reptilians before they had them? What did they trade with? Right, okay. Before they traded with genetics, they were their main trading was microcircuitry, nano material. The reptilian Draconis, through their own scientists, led the way in miniaturizing of circuits and materials, and not just miniaturizing them but moving them into another dimension. So one of the beauties for them is being in a third dimensional world and having circuitry or devices in a fourth dimensional realm, but being able to attach that to a third dimensional being. So it isn't just that it was miniaturized, it became see-through, it became invisible in that reality. The movement of one material from one dimension to another, that's nothing new, but what was new was microprocessors, really small. Remember back to the Roswell space crash in 1947, what really excited the back engineers of the day was the microscopicness of these circuits. If you go onto a website and you buy an old radio from the 1930s or the early 40s, and you look at not just the valves, or the Americans call them vacuum tubes, but you look at the way the wires are connected, it looks just like someone's taken a load of spaghetti, cooked spaghetti, and just thrown it in the back, one wire right across one end soldered and the other soldered, and it's just absolutely horrendous. But what they were given was a system of rerouting or routing these cables in such a way as they were the size of a pinhead, although the size that they first created wasn't anything like that, but that was the principle they were aiming towards. Well, the reptilians have had that for a very long time. However, genetics are things that you can trade with planets. So if you say the Orion Empire or the Cyrus or Sirius Federation, you might not be wanting microcircuits, but you might want to re-terraform a planet. So if somebody's come from Earth and they've got all of Earth's stock, then they can say, well, I will terraform your planet, but this is what I want in return. And the other thing that they trade is body parts. Let's not forget that. Let's not run away from that. There are what we would call abattoir ships, and there are a number of genuine abductees or experiencers who have been on board these abattoir ships and seen body parts, human body parts, ready for trade to other individuals, other alien groups. So let's not just say the reptilians are bad, because if the reptilians were the only bad force, they'd have nobody to sell this material to. The very fact that they do means that there are other alien groups out there just as evil. That's a good question, thank you.
Okay. And finally, what other races have they traded with?
They'll trade with anyone and everyone that's not fighting with them. I can't list the names because a lot of them I wouldn't even know. But they will trade with anyone. Look, they've traded with the humans through the greys. They used the greys as the intermediaries, and they've traded. What they did through the greys was to say, if you do away with your nuclear weapons, we will trade this. So that group's sent off, and then another group comes along and says, well, you keep your weapons, but we'll give you this if you, I don't know, you send 500 people a month to us for tests. And so for a long period of time there was an arrangement between the American government and this particular reptilian stroke grey group that certain individuals would be sent off, and the Americans insisted that they were given names so at least they knew who was being taken. That all went to pieces. That's why we have so many missing children now. This is a massive operation that's been undertaken. It's reducing somewhat now. It'll be very interesting when President Trump starts his war on paedophilia, because then we'll begin to, I hope, begin to see some of these squares joining up with lines, and we can begin to trace it all around. So the reptilians will trade everything and anything if there's anything in it for them. So it just sounds like a corporation in the sense that if there's a buck to be made, then they'll do it.
Okay. Then this next question is from Henry. Is there a global economic and currency reset around the corner, such as Nasara or Gesara?
I think 3 to 6 months ago, even some of the most established money men were predicting a very serious crash through some very, very adept footwork, I have to say. People like the Deutsche Bank managed to stave off the issue, but every September, October, this is the crucial crunch point, and if you're going to have a crash, frankly it'll be around the fall or the autumn, and this coming fall or autumn will be no different from anything else. What we have had is a mini crash in the stock exchange, but I'll use the term that the good guys or the white hats, whatever you want to use the term, managed to stabilize that. The Dow Jones could have really crashed heavily, but was supported and held up. So we've had a mini crash. It's now around the 24,000 mark, where it was approaching maybe 27,000. So it's gone down. The others around the world haven't been hit because this is all about the US. There's still a potential for an economic fall, but what we're noticing is that the elite are becoming very clever at putting pressure on the key players to maintain the status quo. It's not in their interest for a reset. The only people who gain from a reset are people who listen to this show and other shows and who believe that the time for freedom is here. A reset allows a whole range of questions to be asked and a new way of living. The system we have at the moment is still the same old. You're locked basically in a prison. So it's not in the bad guys' interests to have a crash. The only people who would gain from this are some of the most elite in the world who want to crash and do what they've always done, which is come in and buy things at bottom dollar and then build them up again. But the vast majority of the elite don't want to crash because they'll be hit just as hardly as you and I would be.
Okay, Matthew asks, an artist named Robert Limos had an encounter with male and female reptilian aliens whom he viewed looking at him through the flying saucer window. The female appeared to be wearing a tiara. He felt that they were friendly and they were appearing to him because they knew he was an artist and would paint them. What are your thoughts, please? And the pictures are found easily online.
Right. This is the picture I think that you showed me beforehand. Right. This is very interesting, and we're going to try and get this picture up on the website so that you can have a look at that. I'm really pleased about it because normally we perceive aliens to be white, and that's never sat very comfortably with me frankly, when I know that it's not the case. This particular group are a black group. They're very benign, very friendly. I have encountered them, though I can't say that I'm anything like an expert on them, but I have encountered them. They are not reptilian. The questioner uses the word reptilian. I can understand that, because when you look at them, you would see the scales, you would see the whole shape, but the correct term is amphibian. They are a hybridized form of human and amphibian. They are black-skinned. They model themselves a little bit on human culture. That's because they have existed in the oceans of this planet. Between 5'8" and 5'10", something like that, not particularly tall, and do wear clothes. A very benign group, the sort of group that would not get involved in the human side. You know, they wouldn't want to be involved. So yes, I'm familiar with that group, and that, to me, when I saw the picture, that is as I remember them. I think that's a very accurate rendition. You know, and sometimes, you know, either people see these things for real, or they have a download of information and they create them, and they'll say to me, well, you know, I've never seen this, I just made it up, I just thought about what there might be and I did it. And I'll look at it and say, well, there's something going on here, because this is accurate. So yes, you may never have seen them, and you may think that you have just on a quiet Sunday afternoon sat down and done a drawing just as you wanted to, but something has come in and given you that insight. And when I looked at the photographs, then I was quite convinced that I'd seen these beings before. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you.
Okay, William asks, are you aware of octopus aliens? If so, what is their relationship with reptilians? Have they traded genetics with reptilians?
I'm not familiar with, in the true sense of the word, an octopus alien. I am familiar with AI that can create a semi-organic, out of this dimension device, and it has lots of tentacles, precisely because, like a spider, it wants to be attached to a human's back, and then it will insert its many tentacles into the different parts of the brain to control the centers of the brain. And this is in a fourth dimensional form, so you can't normally see them. Some people can see them. Some people are very gifted and have the capability of detecting them. So some spiders are very robotic, some are more organic. The octopusy type things are far more organic looking. I have had reports of jinn pretending to be like an octopus, but that's incredibly rare. If we think about an octopus, then I think we're looking at artificial intelligence. Okay.
Okay. Samuel says, a light emerged out of the middle of my chest, shape called a point within a circle. What does this mean, please?
This is a reasonably well-known device. If normally we would expect this to be a tattoo or a burn mark on your skin, it's not the ownership of either good or evil. If light is emanating from your body, then I would normally assume that to be a very good thing. If you're saying, because I don't really understand it from the question, if this is like projected out in an energy blast, then I would personally look at that as removing a device that has been placed on you. So your higher self or source has thrown something out of your energy system. Whenever we have images and devices, circles, triangles, squares, we're not really looking at God creation, we're not looking at source, we're looking at a mind that has constructed these things. Now these things can be for good or for evil. Some of these symbols we know we use for healing, and some of them are used for controlling people. But it's the very fact that you've described that there was a burst of energy within you, that light came out, and this, if I understand correctly, this symbol was ejected, then I would suggest that this symbol was not natural to you. The circle and the dot can be associated with healing, but the way you've described it, I would think I would have to have more information from you, but that's the answer I would give you on what you've told me. Thank you.
Okay, Alexandra says, please can you tell me the meaning of numerous orange orbs and an orange strip, all seen by the naked eye by two people? Thank you very much. Okay,
the problem with questions like this is that there isn't the detail. First of all, I appreciate the short question, that's really helpful. An orange strip, how long is this orange strip? Does the orange strip connect with one orb to the next orb? Is this orange strip working with the orbs, or is it separate to the orbs? So I've just got to go with the question and try and answer it the best I can. If the orb is an energy orb, and it's anything from the size of a golf ball to a large orange, perhaps bigger, then that is a consciousness from another being, from another dimension much higher than ours, projecting his or her conscious mind into our reality. If you have orbs around you, then someone is taking an interest in you. Someone is wanting to be part and close to you and see you. Strips, rather than a strip, I'd rather have the word like a sort of a bar. In other words, a strip but with rounded ends, not with cut off ends, rounded ends. This is when consciousness comes in with a device. So if an individual from, let's just say, the 7th or 8th dimension wishes to visit somebody in the 3rd dimension, they may come through with a device of some sort, and the device will not come through with them because you can't, or your conscious mind, you just project your mind, you can't bring anything with that, but you'd have a machine or a device to bring something with you. It's not like you carry a stick in your hand and you walk from one room to another. You can't do that in the energy world, but you can have something materialize alongside you. And so the device, the shape you've described to me is a device, possibly for that individual to protect themselves. If they're frightened they'll be attacked. Possibly it's an information gathering. I don't know, but I certainly can tell you that the strip is an electronic device, but the round orbs are pure consciousness. Thank you.
Okay, this question is from Wanda, who says, I would like to know if it's true that dark forces are unable to leave our planet because they're being contained here by the Creator.
I largely agree with that, but unfortunately it's not just dark forces. We're all stuck here by and large. One of the points of the pyramid, one of the reasons that pyramid was built, was to escape the prison planet. For those of you who have studied it, you'll know that Egyptologists refer to these tubes or shafts that run down the sides of the pyramid from the outside to the inside. I'm not sure if it's a 45-degree angle, but they come in and they call them air shafts, as if these small openings would be enough to ventilate the massive pyramid. It's absolutely laughable, but partly they know they're lying and partly they're just fishing around for anything that might sound remotely plausible. The reason for these tubes, I'll call them tubes, was when before the days of the pharaohs, when the leader was about to expire, physical body, they were placed in the black sarcophagus, this is the king's chamber, and at the moment of death there were far more electronic devices and crystal devices in the pyramid than there are today. Their soul was literally shot out of the pyramid up these tubes, and I'm sure you'll be aware that one of them is aimed, or was aimed, at the belt of Orion. This is the Orion Empire. So we know that at least 10,500, 25,000 years ago, this Earth was a prison planet, and there was an energy field around the planet to prevent everyone getting out. And what they had was a device that was so powerful that it could punch a hole through this net. So they would send a burst of energy and follow it up with the soul. So there would be a hole punched in the net. This would last for, I don't know, I have no idea, 3 seconds, 4 seconds before the net rehealed, but that was enough time to send the soul back to the origin. And then the days of the pharaohs, basically, they had a sort of a garbled account of this, and they would mummify the body and their soul would go back, and they would live again, etc. So that was their primitive understanding of what had been in the past. So the net that surrounds Earth doesn't just keep bad forces in, it keeps good forces in. But what I can add to that is that most of the portals are now being guarded by good forces, and the negative forces cannot leave through the portal technology. That was why CERN was primarily built, so that they could open communications to the fourth dimension, and then these bad guys could escape dodge, as Americans would say. Well, we know that Connecting Consciousness and other groups prevented CERN from doing that, and the result is that these bad people are stuck here, and that's why they're facing the music. There's one arm that says, well, why don't we just get rid of them? Why don't we just let CERN be built, open the portal, and let these things go and leave us? But the problem is that they wouldn't, would they? They would then call for reinforcements, and their reinforcements would arrive, and then we would really be in a difficult state, much worse than we are. So that is why many of us took the decision that any portal on this planet basically had to be stopped or guarded, and that left the human race to deal with what we've got without fresh influxes of invasions from the negative side. It's a good question, thank you.
Okay, thanks. This question is from Tonya. It's quite long, but I'll read it all out.
Okay.
A spiritual teacher posted about the importance of claiming energetic consent. She gave a statement that was to be said with conviction that basically established boundaries, stating I was a sovereign being and no ETs were able to place implants, track, etc. In brackets, I'm paraphrasing. The statement highly resonated with me, and I said it with conviction. Very shortly after that, a foreign object emerged out of my left back shoulder blade area. Was that an implant? It hurt so badly, like metal or broken glass was coming out of my back. I never found the object. Thanks for all you do.
Shortly, yes, you've answered your own question. You already know the answer to that, but you've shared it with me, and I share it with the audience because that's empowering people, isn't it? You know, there's a difference here. If a negative alien comes to you and you say that you are sovereign, you don't wish this being to interact with you, 9 times out of 10 they'll laugh at you because they don't honor that. Now they'll take the karma for that, they'll take the problem for that in the future, but at that moment in time, negative beings generally do not take any notice of the intention of a human, unless that human has great strength and great power and psychic capabilities. But when you're talking about your physical body, this is yours, and if somebody or something has interfered with you and placed a device without your permission, you then quite rightly have the authority to say, I want this out of my body, and if you have the strength and you have the intent, then you can remove it. The only concern I give you is that doesn't mean everything's gone from you. What may have been removed was the most pressing, the most evil one, and I would suggest that you give it a bit of a break and then you try it again. And what I also suggest to people is that you visualize areas of your body where you think there may be an issue, so you targeting your energy intent to a particular part of your body, so your right arm or your left arm or your leg. That way you're much more focused and you're more likely to have a greater impact. But I'm glad you shared that with me, because people have the right to be sovereign, and you have the right to remove things that should never have been there. So well done you, keep going at it. And one day if we get this healing centre up and running as quickly as possible, you might actually want to come and talk to a number of healers and say, this I did myself, why don't we run a workshop and see if we can train others to do the same thing, because wouldn't that be good? Thank you.
Okay, Carlos asks, I've been told that not everyone will be on Earth after the shift. How many people do you think would make it?
No, I can't. If I give you a figure, then that figure could come about, and then I'd feel very responsible for that. We create reality out of our thought. What I will say to you is that the majority of people won't come through. Only a sizable minority will make the shift change. It doesn't mean that the majority are doomed forever. It just means that they weren't ready at that time, and I'm hopeful that at some point in the future they will get another chance or another choice to make another decision. So what I'll tell you is that a sizable minority will make the transference. I've been told actually that is the right word. No human told me this. I've told that ascension isn't the right word. The word I am to use is transference. You're transferring from a biological state to a semi-biological state. We're not going straight into energy bodies, but we're going to go into more of an energy construct within our biological bodies, and we will transfer across from one boundary to the next. What I'm going to do now is thank people. I've got my list of people who've donated, and clearly, I've been off air for a while, so this list is longer than normal. I'm sorry some of you have been missed out, but I couldn't, in fairness, read out anymore. So there's a long list, but it would be wrong not to do this, and I'm not just going to give a token number. I've done as many as I can. So I want to thank everybody who's donated. It means a lot to me. Thank you. Keeps me going, keeps me doing what I do. So Alfredo, Charlotte, Manuel, Robin, Shari, Charlie, Oscar, Joanne's, Drumset, Janice, Mohammed, Namidia, Jolin, A.L., Daniela, Martin, Peter, Ariane, Neil, Valerie, Jennifer, Bill, Lola, I think that's Al Gerardo, Rick, Darix, Enrique, Eva, Kerry, Julia, Bernard, Adrian, Gary, Christine, Catherine, Sue, Sheena, Edgar, Vincent, Alicia, Daniel, Tina, Shamsa, Catherine, Cheryl, Isabel, Stephanie, Terry, Raymond, I think that's Danius, Nathan, Mary, Jennifer, Paula, Dietmar, Jose, Daniela, Imogen, Julie, Becky, and here we are, Hans. Yes, I did get your donation, thanks ever so much, and you're written on here, Hans, Katarine, Gillian, Yvonne, nearly finished, Julie, Thomas, Joanne, Sylvia, Carl, Milo, Jenny, Sarah or Sarah, Mark, Vanessa, Joanne, I think it's XAY, I don't know how to pronounce that, but thank you, Gerald, Yekoko, and Anna. And there were others, but I literally couldn't do any more. I didn't feel right, but I wanted to thank as many of you as possible. Thank you so much. The work must go on. We can't give up. It's too important. Thank you very much. We'll do a few more questions, and then I think probably we'll be coming to the end of my first podcast.
Okay, yes, we're almost up to the hour. Lauren asks, when Trump announced the attack on Syria, his eyes looked pure black. I'm not the only one who noticed this. What's up with that? Also, after all of the good he was doing, why would he lower himself like this? Does someone have dirt on him?
Right, no. Let's be clear on this. I haven't seen the black eyes. It doesn't mean they didn't go black. I haven't seen them. What I'd ask everyone to understand is that President Trump and President Putin are actually close friends, and they are presidents of a country that has been portrayed traditionally by the conservative elements for many years as hostile. There are enormous organizations that make money out of a potential hostility between America and Russia. Obviously, arms manufacture is one of the most obvious. When you're a president, I guess, you find yourself a president in a setting that has a lot of people from the previous administrations and a lot of people who are frightened of the way that they are projected to the people with money. So what Trump and Putin had to do was play to the audience, and this isn't the audience of the citizens, this isn't you, the audience, or me, this is the audience of the powerful people around them, and they needed to organize it so that it appeared that they were being strong with each other. What both Trump and Putin were not going to have was a third world war, and so when the Russian ambassador said to the United Nations, if any American or French or British missiles kill any Russian personnel, Russia will assume itself to be at war with the United States of America. That is an incredible statement, but it had already been agreed between Trump and Putin. This allowed Trump to go back to say to his people, right, well, what we've got to do, you know, is we can't now go and attack 50, 60 targets. We can probably only attack 2 or 3, and I'll just phone President Putin and tell him that he's got 24 hours to move his assets out of this location and this location and this location so that no Russian personnel get killed, therefore we don't have a third world war. But I have to do something because all of the powerful people who are still very, very powerful around me and around the world are looking to America to fulfill its obligations. Remember, the United States, not the president, is considered the policeman, using the word, the policeman of the world. So if America did not do anything, if Trump had not done anything, every tin pot nation, regardless of whatever its background was, could then have tried to take hostages, tried to create real terrorist bombs, etc., etc. So Trump felt he had to do it. So I fully understand that, but the background or the backdrop to this was there was no real possibility of anything more serious than just 3 targets being hit. So that's that. Now the black eye caper, I really don't know. That can be 2 things. One, you can be possessed by a demon, and I've got rid of many demons from people who've had black eyes. And the other thing we have to be careful of is that there are some alien species, there are some aliens that have black eyes. And we do have to be very careful. There are some books that were written in the 1960s and 70s where the hybridized children or young people were described as having black eyes and had nothing to do with demons. Okay.
Okay, I think that's it for this week.
Great, that's wonderful. So thanks very much, and thanks very much to everyone. It's been really wonderful. It's the start of many to come, and just keep your questions coming. So thank you. God bless.